Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the International Symposium on Competitiveness of North Indian States to Achieve Inclusive Growth. I would first of all like to welcome Mr. Mehta, Secretary General, Cuts International, Ms. Pollock, Director, North India Office, US Embassy, Mr. Daniel Mitchell, Chairman, Center for Freedom and Prosperity, Mr. Paramjeet Singh Sahai, who is the retired IFS officer, Mr. Sebastian Says, who is lead economist, Trade and Competitiveness Division, the World Bank, and the Honorable Governor Shri Badnor Sahab. I now request Mr. Mehta to take over the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Ambassador Paramjeet Singh Sahai, Sebastian Says, and our expert on this particular project from the US, Daniel Mitchell, Chairman of the Center for Freedom and Prosperity. The idea of inviting Daniel Mitchell particularly is as a part of this particular project. He's the third such American expert who's here. And this project has been going on for some time. We've had experts in order to share with us their own experience of what happens in another federal country like India and the USA. There again, states have their own jurisdiction, their own laws, etc., and much more independent of the Indian quasi-federal system. So we do hope that his interaction with stakeholders in India would be of benefit to him as well as to us. I would like to thank you for this, and as well as he's already been to Lucknow as a part of this project. As I said, this project is about North Indian states, which is basically covering Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and Himachal Pradesh. So, I welcome you again to this second part of this particular project. I was talking to a friend of mine here in Chandigarh, Kamal Vasudev, and he remembers seeing us in the 1980s when we were a young consumer organization working out of a garage, and he is so happy to see us where we are today. That is surely because of determination by not only me but a very set of young colleagues who have helped us to move where we are and continue to move forward. In fact, sitting in Jaipur, we are an international NGO today. We have centers in Hanoi on the east, 3 in Africa, covering the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, Accra in West Africa, Nairobi in east, and Lusaka in southern Africa. Then we also have a center in the international city of Geneva, which is again something which is a matter of great pride for us because it donor who approached us, Hewlett Foundation, that the kind of work that you're doing, we are a pro-trade NGO, in the sense that we do not think that everything is a bad thing to do, or is a bad thing. It's a good thing in many ways. Of course, there are problems in any global organization which is becoming more and more evident today, and was one of the highlights of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address at Davos, which I and Governor VP Singh were watching together in the Zoom. It's a remarkable speech. I'll come back to that particular later in the context of this particular project as well. We are now venturing to Washington DC as our 6th overseas center, which we're going to launch in April. And one of our mentors in this particular venture is the former ambassador of the US in India, Richard Verma, and other friends there as well. Now, this symposium marks the end of a 2-year initiative, which is evaluation of competitiveness among North Indian states, lessons from the US, supported by the US Embassy. India has been working towards enhancing state competitiveness in order to facilitate ease of doing business. I mean, ease of doing business is again an issue which still remains in controversy. The states are competing with each other on issues such as attracting foreign investments, industrial development, by leveraging their particular strengths, and managing their weaknesses. Not all states have a sea border, for example. Thus, it is important to periodically, and particularly these states here in northern India are all landlocked states. They don't have the advantage of southern and western or eastern states, or having sea next to them. Thus, it is important to periodically assess the performance of states to highlight the progress made, identify the unfinished agenda, and share success stories and challenges faced in the adoption of reforms. The Department of Public Policy and Promotion, with the support from the World Bank, has been, the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, with the support from the World Bank, has been conducting a similar exercise on issues pertaining to ease of doing business at the level of states as well. Now, we did jump in terms of doing business ranking from 130 to 100 on the basis of parameters set by the World Bank, though the same are being recalculated. The Center for Global Development is, but we hope that the country is right to remain unaffected. We managed to deep dive to form an important baseline and identify the unfinished agenda through an independent 360 degrees review involving interaction with government, industry and stakeholders in this particular project. Issues as emerged have been captured in the draft overview paper placed in the pen drives, and I would request all of you to please send us your comments on this particular paper. Let me share with you some of the key findings. Firstly, there is no doubt that significant legislative and regulatory reforms have been initiated by North Indian states, and I congratulate them for this. These include adoption of labor reforms, streamlining of applications and constitution of single window clearance mechanism, among others. Regulatory impact assessment, need for re-engineering of the regulatory framework in India. Thus, there is a need to use tools such as regulatory impact assessment, which is also called cost-benefit analysis, to clean up the laws and thus reduce the cost of regulation for doing business. Just to give an example, one of the latest things which President Trump has done is to revive the Office of Regulatory Affairs in the US, which is a center under the Office of Budget Management, which has adopted a British system that if you wish to bring in any particular new regulatory action, then you have to get rid of 2 regulatory actions, 2 regulatory measures. So 1 in, 2 out. That is the way that they've been able to achieve quite a lot. And apparently the savings which have been made so far in the last 8 or 9 months of Trump administration which is is running into billions of dollars as a result of this particular action. Now, interestingly, the International Finance Corporation, a World Bank affiliate, has given us a small assignment, which is what we will doing a cost-benefit analysis of the Shops and Establishment Act for the government of Rajasthan. The first time we are doing this in a state of this nature, which is something new for the bureaucracy as well. And we hope that that kind of entry that we are able to get. Our Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Vasundhara Raje, is extremely pro-reform leader and has been one of the first states to have identified redundant laws and scrapped them. State-specific export policy is another issue which has come up, and there is a need to look at global value chains when marketing a state and have tailor-made export policies to improve the state's competitiveness. Now, if you look at many of the ocean adjoining countries, whether it's Malaysia or Singapore or Indonesia or any of them, you'll find that there are industrial parks and ports which only have input and output. There's nothing which they produce for domestic consumption, but they're part of the value chain. Now, as I said a little earlier, North Indian states are landlocked, but it doesn't mean that they cannot be part of the value chain insofar as goods can be shipped by air and sent back by air if they're lightweight. We may not have the advantage of Bombay or Kandla or Calcutta or Madras or whatever it is. But it can still be a part of global value chains, and therefore how states evolve their export policies is extremely critical. It is analysis of policy failures. This is another lesson that has been found, that there is a cost in implementation of policies and one needs to analyze the causes of failures so as to learn lessons and not repeat them. And these are lessons learned. I wouldn't use the word failure. Thus, the focus should be on analyzing ex-post policy implementation failures so as to learn from one mistake and avoid repetition. This is a very strong recommendation to states, which often doesn't happen. We don't analyze as to why it did not work and what were the reasons it did not work and how can we use those lessons in order to see that we don't repeat the same kind of mistake. And this is something which is very important. Mapping of sectors. Each state should undertake an assessment to map its competitiveness in specific sectors and then focus on design of policies and its effective implementation vis-a-vis the specific sector. For example, the tourism sector in Rajasthan is extremely promising, and much more can be done than what is being done. Even last year the performance was excellent, but if you look at Punjab, food processing, that is a very important sector which can really have a huge potential for growth, including our Indian food processing ministers. Another lesson that we found was building capacity of entry and mid-level government officials. Capacity building is so crucial, and it is often not targeted as it should be. And you expect that officials will join and will learn on the job. They don't. I mean, by the time they learn, it will probably be too late. And therefore, there have to be very specific capacity building projects, including orientation of attitude on professional performance at the lower levels of governance is the key, is the core key. It's not at the level of the principal secretary or the secretary or somebody who's policy will be implementing. It's at the lower level. The Tehsildar, the Patwari, for example, all have to be audited in order to ensure that things are moving slowly, or things don't move slowly. And how these local level government officials can work with experts in civil society on providing hands-on training can go a long way to improving performance. Now the crucial part is that when we look at EoDB and most of the discussion which are happening, even in Davos, the Prime Minister made a speech attracting investments and so on. Now big investors can manage a lot of these issues on their own. They have a huge staff. But if you are a small-scale unit, you are the managing director of a small-scale unit, you are the labor welfare officer also. Literally, you have to do multitasking. And besides the fact is that on a per capita basis, they employ much more. The benefits are clearly known, and therefore, how do we make the lives of MSMEs easier? Is again something which governments must understand and appreciate as a matter of priority. In order to do that, I just read a little sad news the other day that there was a new labor legislation to reduce the number of inspectors for small-scale units, but that has again been sort of dropped. I mean, just giving an example of what is required. Now, many of these measures will be required to be done at the level of the central government or the union government, and many will have to be done at the level of the state. Now, just to give you an example, in terms of labor reform, Article 264(1) of the Constitution allows each state to vary a central law, which is what Rajasthan did in the case of the Industrial Disputes Act, in terms of closing down the factories and not requiring a prior permission, where the law says 100 labor. Now what Rajasthan has done is to raise it to 300. Now that is an example that even if it is a central legislation, the state can do it, can have its own particular way it can sort of get around any of these barriers, as it were. Now, let me conclude here, Your Excellency, to show that state governments will note these suggestions, and particularly even in terms of Chandigarh, of which you are the head, could look into many of these suggestions in order to see as to how Chandigarh is already progressing hugely in many ways. Told that in terms of the solar energy, Chandigarh has been mentioned particularly by the Prime Minister as being the top in this country in terms of city. 17 megawatts rooftop alone. Just to give you an example. Now, in addition to the above suggestions which have come up with these findings, and as I said, this paper is circulated in a pen drive, and again, request of the organizers and my colleagues who are working on the project is to please send your comments so that it can be refined. Now, some of the things which states can do is, as I said, one is, of course, I give you the example of Rajasthan carrying out a labor reform on a central legislation, which other states have also copied. Madhya Pradesh has done that, have done the same thing, and I'm sure some other states. So there is a possibility that states can also do in their own way. Now, some other areas which I think we can, other states can start thinking is third-party assessments, evaluation of reforms that have been implemented by third parties to ensure objectivity, credibility, and identify scope for further improvement or replication. My friend Malti Jain, who's sitting here, has been working on a project like this with Ernst & Young in Rajasthan, for example. Again, I'm giving an example of Rajasthan just because I have first-hand knowledge. And this is not to say that the other states are not doing similarly, I'm sure they are. But this has to be done in a structured manner and in a manner that is known to the public at large. And finally, to undertake cost-benefit analysis and regulations or regulatory impact assessment to reduce the cost of regulatory burden. We would like states to remove barriers to prosperity. So you don't have to grow. If the states even remove all the barriers to prosperity, that itself will lead to growth. You don't have to give any extra incentive. Now, study also to understand the regulatory compliance burden on specific small and medium enterprises. As I said, they have to be singled out for a special treatment, a special need. As I said again, and everybody knows this, on a per capita basis, they are bigger employer, they are bigger exporter. To conclude, let me thank the US Embassy again for their support spread over the last 2 years, and we look forward for further support to deepen our work in this area. I also acknowledge the support of Vicky and FESME, the co-organizers of this symposium. Lastly, the deliberation must not only underline the challenges, but also find sustainable solutions for our states to usher ease of doing business response which translate into investments, economic growth, and the most crucial challenge before a country today is to create jobs. Right? Thank you very much. May I now invite Ariel to deliver remarks.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here back in Chandigarh. This is my second trip to Chandigarh in about 3 months. I've only been here for about 4.5 months, so I think I'm doing pretty good. And I'm really excited to be here to speak at the Symposium on making North Indian states competitive and inclusive. Let me first thank the Consumer Unity and Trust Society, or CUTS, for their leadership and vision in organizing this event. My dear friend, Mr. Pradeep Mehta, thank you so much. We're so grateful for the outstanding cooperation and partnership that we've enjoyed with you and with CUTS. It's also an honor to share the dais with the Honorable Governor of Punjab, Shri Singh. Thank you, sir, for being here. To Mr. Paramjit Singh, to Sebastian Says, and to my countryman, Dan Mitchell. Thank you also for being here. To all of you, distinguished officials here from across North India, thank you for your support and, more importantly, investing your time, taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this important symposium. The vibrancy of North India is palpable in this room, and I'm definitely happy to be here and happy to be representing the Embassy's North India office. It's very humbling to see over 2 years of partnership, research, a lot of travel and collaboration to culminate in this symposium this evening. And I hope you'll allow me a moment to recognize my colleague, Mr. Doug Fowler, who I'm going to embarrass right now. I only joined as director of this office about 5 months ago now. But Doug has been here since the beginning of this project, which started 2 years ago, and he's done a wonderful job in working with CUTS to get us to where we are tonight. So let me first start off by offering a snapshot of U.S.-India relations, particularly our growing commercial linkages and our people-to-people ties. If you look back at the last 12 to 13 years, starting with the historic civil nuclear deal between President Bush and Prime Minister Singh, the U.S.-India relationship has undergone a far-reaching transformation, both in terms of our strategic convergence and our habits of cooperation. This transformation has gained new momentum in the last few years under the leadership of President Obama and now President Trump, and of course Prime Minister Modi. And we have re-energized many dialogues and working groups to ensure close coordination on the full range of strategic and commercial issues. Two-way trade between the United States and India has increased 5-fold over the past decade, reaching $109 billion. And we were so pleased that India played host to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit just this past November. What an important opportunity for India to showcase that is open for business and innovation. And recognizing the critical role of states in India's economic growth story, we're also increasing focus on subnational engagement, meaning we want to see more interactions between our states and the Indian states, American governors and Indian chief ministers. And I'm pleased to say that the real driving force of our relationship, our people-to-people ties, continue to grow. North India plays an important role in the larger U.S.-India relationship and our partnership. The economic dynamism of this region is remarkable, as are its people-to-people ties with the United States. And that's why 2 years ago, the U.S. Embassy established a North India office. And I'm not sure that many of you know about our office, but it was very important for the U.S. government to ensure that we were working at the state level, engaging the people of North India. And so that's what I'm here to do, that's what my team is here to do, and we do that in a couple of different ways. In one way, we coordinate the whole of U.S. government engagement in North India. We have a number of agencies doing wonderful work across 8 states and territories, as well as the rest of the country. But here in North India, the U.S. Agency for International Development is working, our Health and Human Services, including the Centers for Disease Control, our U.S. Commercial Service, and under it, the The second thing that we do, though, is that we lead engagement with the people and the state governments of North India. And we do that in a couple of different ways as well. You see Dan is here. We bring speakers, U.S. experts who come and engage with their counterparts and across various spectrums on issues that are important to our bilateral relationship. And we also engage through our grants programs, and that's how the symposium and our partnership with CUTS really came to be. The long history of bipartisan support for this partnership in both countries and the increasing convergence of our strategic interests will compel the United States and India, natural allies, in the words of Prime Minister Modi, to continue to deepen our cooperation. So let me focus now on the central theme of today's symposium, competitive federalism. If harnessed correctly, competitive federalism can stimulate innovation, boost economic growth, and improve government performance. Similar to how competition between companies can generate benefits for consumers, individual states and a federal system can compete with one another for investment and development solutions. And this in turn can spur improvements in infrastructure and ease of doing business, as well as government accountability. State governments can also gain more control over programs and budgets, resulting in citizens receiving better goods and services at a lower cost to the taxpayer. We're seeing an increasing race to the top among Indian states to attract investment, including foreign direct investment. Recent figures have U.S. foreign direct investment to India currently standing at $28 billion, which is an increase up from $7.7 billion in 2004. And there are over 500 U.S. companies operating across India. Many of these companies want to invest more, and they're looking at states competing for their investment and attention, including right here in North India. Now, this past year, the World Bank, along with DIBP, released its Ease of Doing Business rankings, and I was very pleased to see that nearly all of the North Indian states increased in the rankings, with 3 of the states making the top 10. These rankings are a sign that competitive federalism is taking root here in India as states work to build their brands as investor-friendly destinations. Now, competitive federalism is also part of America's success story, going back to the earliest days of our republic. Alexander Hamilton, one of America's leading founding fathers, applauded commercial competition between states. And the famous French diplomat in political science, Alexis de Tocqueville, traveled across America in the early 1800s to observe the great experiment of federalism. He admired the decentralized system of the United States because it enabled federal government to focus on national obligations, leaving the states to compete with one another. Maybe it's not all competition, but co-opetition, cooperate and compete with one another to solve issues related to investment, infrastructure, employment, and labor mobility. Such a system, in other words, can help build states and the central governments leverage their respective strengths. So let me highlight a few recent examples from the United States. The state of California has been a leader in regulation of air quality, setting an example for the entire nation. State legislators in California and Texas have enacted laws mandating renewable energy targets, which has spurred IT and energy companies to set up operations and research centers in both of those states. Wisconsin pioneered, among other novelties, the income tax and a safety net for the unemployed years before those ideas actually became national law. States like South Carolina and Tennessee have reformed labor laws to make it attractive for car manufacturers to set up operations in those states. The state of Georgia, due to tax and labor reforms, has become an attractive alternative for those in the film industry who want to save money by filming outside of Hollywood. And Amazon recently announced that it's looking to establish its second headquarters in the United States outside of its Seattle base, creating a whirlwind of activity as over 300 cities partnering with states are competing for Amazon's attention. In essence, states have become laboratories where we can experiment with a variety of potential solutions to social and economic challenges before scaling them up at the federal level. If the United States is to develop innovative and effective solutions to such issues as clean energy or education, urban infrastructure, they will be forged by state governments, working hand in hand with local communities and the federal government. And I would suggest that the same is true for India. So let me conclude by underscoring why this symposium is so important. As the famous Harvard Business School economist Michael Porter said, nations are most competitive when they have thriving competition within their domestic economy. Given the scale of opportunity for competition here in India, there are few other countries more exciting or important. India will one day have the world's largest middle class and the largest number of college graduates. 60% of the Indian population is under the age of 30, and by 2030, India will be the world's most populous nation and the third largest economy. 2/3 of the India of 2030 is yet to be built. And if India seizes the full potential of the 21st century economy, it will transform the lives of more than 1/6 of humanity. And that's definitely a goal worth striving for. Moreover, India can share its insights and expertise with the world. We can learn a lot from each other, and the United States can learn a lot from India, given the similarity of our countries and how our states interact with each other. So I look forward to seeing what kind of innovative programs and policies and ideas pioneered by Indian states will become future national success stories. And I also look forward to the symposium and what we all can learn from each other together. North India has phenomenal potential, and I hope that today's and tomorrow's discussions will stimulate new ideas on how this important region can take full advantage of the 21st century global economy. Prime Minister Modi may have put it best when he said, "It is too limiting to ask what the US and India can do for each other. The real test will be in seeing what we can do for the world." I couldn't think of a better time for us to learn from our past, learn from each other in the present, and plan ways to foster the kind of healthy competition that will enable us to solve the problems of tomorrow. Again, thank you for inviting me, thank you for your partnership, Cuts, and I wish you all a wonderful symposium. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you very much. One thing we can certainly learn from India is how did we undergo the pains of GST? You don't have a GST. I know. And probably one very large federal country will never have as all the others have. With that, may I request Daniel? How long will you take? We are well in time.
10, 12 minutes, I was told.
Thank you.
But I grew up in New York, so if you want me to talk faster, I can.
I'm glad you are not speaking in French.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction and having me here. And I want to say thank you to Cuts for inviting me. This is my first trip to India. I guess I've been here since January 16th, but it feels like all the meetings they set up, but I've been here for a month or so. So I feel like it's sort of like you're cramming for a test. And I've been forced to learn so much about India, and it's been great to learn and experience these trips and these meetings I've had over the last several days. When Ariel was mentioning the potential growth of India between now and 2030 and becoming the third biggest economy in the world, it actually reminded me that of all the different groups in America, because we're a nation of immigrants, the most economically successful are Indian Americans. I mean, even Trump probably approves of those immigrants because they do so well and create so much prosperity for America. And so it got me thinking about this potential for India becoming so rich into the future if you could harness the same talent and ability here at home in India. And the question is, why isn't India already rich? And one of the things I was looking at when I was doing research for this trip, of course I was looking at the ease of doing business because that's a very important theme here, and India made a big improvement over the last year. But going from 136 to 100 still means you're only 100. Now if you keep that trend up, another 3 years, you'll be up near the top. But ease of doing business, of course, is just one of many factors that determine a country's prosperity. And so when I looked at the Fraser Institute's Economic Freedom of the World Index, which measures not just the regulatory policy that is mostly captured in ease of doing business, but when I looked at, that looks at fiscal policy, monetary policy, trade policy, rule of law, and property rights, and India is number 95. Now, India's score has improved over time. The question is, how much richer could India be today if it was following some of the best practices, sort of look around the world and pick maybe, okay, here's a good policy from Estonia, here's a good policy from the US. Of course, there are some bad policies you don't want to copy from the US, but look around the world at best practices and get that economic freedom score higher, and I think the economic success you see for Indians in America would be copied by Indians here back at home. But what I want to do in my brief remarks is sort of focus on how do you get jobs? Because in my meetings and discussions, that's obviously one of the key factors that's driving government policy, how to create a prosperous economy. And I think the obvious thing to focus on is that there is a relationship between the good policy and jobs. Because as an economist, I want to take a step backwards and simply make a point that is not appreciated enough, and certainly in the United States, and I suspect it's not appreciated enough in India. Companies only create jobs when they think hiring additional workers will generate profits. In other words, you can't love employees if you hate employers. There has to be an economic system that tells somebody the economic climate is good enough that if you bring another person into your company, they're going to generate, it might cost you this much to hire them, but they'll generate this much in revenue. And when that happens, when a company thinks that's going to be the consequence of hiring another worker, they're going to hire another worker. In other words, you can't divide, you can't escape the notion that capital and labor are what economists call complementary goods. You want there to be more investment. And the great news, every meeting I had in India, everyone talked about incentives for investment. And now, I actually have a slightly different perspective than Ariel. When I see the bidding war for Amazon, I'm not sure I like that, because what I want is low taxes and light regulation for all companies. I don't want politicians to reward Amazon. It's already a big, rich company. Amazon doesn't need to get money from the taxpayers. Instead, I want Amazon to pick a state because that state has good overall policy, not just for Amazon, but for the small businesses and the medium businesses as well. I don't want the government to discriminate in favor of large companies at the expense of SMEs. So let me just close up by making a few comments about things that I think can be learned from the U.S. experience. Tomorrow morning, I'll actually talk about the competitive federalism issue. And one of the things I'll suggest is, even more so than the United States, Switzerland might be a good model. But today I want to talk about sort of cost-benefit analysis and optimal regulation. It was mentioned already that we have a system in the United States with a body called OIRA, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, that is in charge of sort of supervising the regulatory and the cost-benefit work inside the United States. We have a very specific system where the Congress will pass laws, the President will sign laws, the bureaucracies, the different executive branch departments will then be responsible for promulgating regulations, and they have to do this through a very specific process where they issue the regulations in something called the Federal Register. You then have a comment period. There are certain legal obligations for cost-benefit analysis, but ultimately all those things are designed for one thing. How do you try to get a regulation consistent with the laws that have been passed? How do you get the regulation that will achieve the goal in the least costly way for the economy? Because if you have a choice between imposing $1 billion of cost and imposing $10 billion of cost, obviously it's better for your economy to impose the $1 billion of cost. And then, of course, hopefully, the benefit will be more than that $1 billion. That's the whole theory of the cost-benefit analysis and the optimal regulation literature that exists out there in academia and among the think tanks and things like that. Now, there's a couple of other things that are worth pointing out. In addition to OIRA and the different cost-benefit analysis that occurs inside the different regulatory agencies in America, there's a policy in Canada that I think is worth pointing out. They have something called a regulatory budget. And the regulatory budget is designed to encourage people inside the government to consider trade-offs. In other words, if the government, if there's a policy saying you can do $10 billion of new regulations this year, and you have agencies that independently might want to do 15 billion. They then have to compete with each other for whether their regulation makes more sense when you have an overall cap on the regulatory burden that's been imposed by the political process. So I think there's lots of things that can be learned. Things that can be learned from the US, things that can be learned from other countries as well. But the key thing, I want to focus, sort of bring us back to where I started with the comment that the job creation necessarily will follow the profitable opportunities. And the profitable opportunities, I think, are driven in large part by whether or not economic policy is properly designed to reward people who are going to work, save, invest, take risks, and be entrepreneurial. That's true in India, it's true in the United States, it's true in Europe, and Africa, and Latin America, and I'm very optimistic after this trip that it's going to be very much true in India with the continued improvement based on what we've seen over the last several years. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you for re-emphasizing the focus on SMEs. May I invite Ambassador?
Honorable Pradeep Mehta, other distinguished colleagues at the dais, and the distinguished audience. I think I'm very happy to be here because it gives me an opportunity to go back to 1984 when I was posted in Washington, D.C. as Minister of Commerce and Director General of Supply. So I was involved for 3 years in the nitty-gritty of what we are going to discuss. I was looking at both trade promotion as well as purchases. I think that is an area which has become of great interest to the United States. That is the trade balance. So I was helping Inaugural to see that the trade balance went in favor of America when we made purchases, you see, from that country. I will try to give you a perspective from what we were in 84 and to 87 when I was there, and what we are now as far as India-US trade relations are concerned. I will not give you figures because I think a lot of the figures have not been given by our colleague from the American Embassy. The trade that makes it easier for me and difficult for me because it takes me a few of my minutes, you see, but I think we need to see some minutes, you see. I would say that it is a good beginning by cuts, and it is very important at this juncture to see how we could build on relationship. I would say that we have to look at various 4 or 5 parameters. I would like to look at it. What were in 84, 85, as for the image, the country image was concerned. What were the trade environment you see at that time? What are the trade promotions, things we were doing, you see, and few other things. I think when we look at it, at that time, I think we used to call that there were 2 estranged democracies. I think India and USA, which is the thing we try to talk democracies, but we are estranged. But now I think we are the 2 democracies, you see, which are working together. What has happened over the years is a change in mindset. We have started doing each other from a different perspective as friends. I think this is very important to see, to view as friends, you see, and I think business also, if you're doing business, the trust is absolutely essential. And this is what happened, and this is what happened. This is the, for me, this is the thing. I think like when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, you see, went to see to USA, and I think at that time, they wrote a commentatorial thing like that, you see. And I think the theme was, Chale Saath Saath. Let's move together. And now I think the message from Mr. Modi is that Sanja Prayas, Sabka Vikas. I think it is that if we work together, we can do a lot of these things together, and the results can be better. And also it is very important to see that the relationship now is not beyond the party changes. I think we had a time when Manmohan Singh could do with George Bush and Barack Obama, and Narendra Modi can do with Donald, you see. So that is very important to see. Of course, we're calling each other true friends or naturalized, sometimes of course it's debatable, the words and things like that, you see. I was very happy to see, in this case, I would like to draw your attention to the address made by Ambassador Juster, I don't know how to pronounce his name, American Ambassador, it is the inaugural address, and I think she quoted quite a few things from his address. And I think he said that, you see, he was very happy to be here, come as a friend of India. He's perceived to be a friend of India. Well, I think so. Nothing could be better than for an ambassador, because I've been also considered a country, to be perceived as a friend in the country where you are. But at the same time, I think it is essential for the ambassador to show that he's also perceived to be a friend in the US State Department. If he's not a friend, is he there, then he can't achieve. I think it is absolutely essential for any ambassador to have credibility on both the sides. Unless you have that, you cannot do that, you see. So I hope, while he continues to be a friend of India, he does not use friendship in the State Department. Here again, I'll say that, you see, he's talking of 5 pillars in India-US relationship. I'm talking only of one pillar, and today's this thing that is economic pillars and things like that, and how we have. We're not talking of the mindset, the change in mindset, things like that. We have to see that. You see, there was a time when I talked over 84, 85. We organized a seminar in the United States, in Washington, D.C. And I think we did the credit at that time, 1987. The first time we gave exposure to the Indian software industry. But it was a time where it was very difficult for us to even get the manager of the software companies to attend the seminar. Now, it changed. Now the CEOs of the software companies like to come to India. So it is again, I think we're living in an environment, you see, where India has arrived at the world. Like today only I'm seeing my colleague Pradeep Hardeep Puri saying that India talks and other listeners. I won't go that far, because I think that should not give us a feeling of haughtiness. I think that we can't do that, but I think people are listening to India's views, what India matters, what India thinks, what are we doing, and where we can. Again, let me identify, when Rajiv Gandhi visited, it is very difficult for us to give exposure. I think India was not in demand at that time. With great difficulty, I think he made, I think that, to his credit, I think what he had the advantage was the youth. We are talking of the youth advantage now. I think it is about that, and it is message that India will be moving the 21st century. I think we are now in the 21st century, and we think we are moving that thing. Again, I think our seminar is on competitiveness. We did the same thing. You know, in America, you know, you compete, but when you win, then you are given a yellow card. Say, if we are exporting cast iron pipes, and if we are able to compete, we are given the yellow card. And yellow card in practice turns out to be a red card, because once your business system process is disrupted, it's very difficult. We had problems in the case of shrimps, exporting of shrimps, export of black pepper and things like that. There are certain problems, I think, which were there in 1984, still stay with us. That is intellectual property rights. I think these are the few things, you see, which probably will be with us. And then I think one thing very important happened in that time, 1984, was that our signing in 1984, December, we signed the first MOU on technology transfer. That is the dual use, see, cooperatives which could be exported from the United States. I mean, that's the first time in that of which we are getting really reaping the better benefit, real benefits, you see, like you said, the US nuclear cooperation and things like that, you see. Another thing I think is the states, we're talking the states. We made a very innovative approach in that case. Because at that time, I think India was not keen for a relationship with the level of states. We decided that we should go in a different way. And we didn't in practice, where we signed an MOU with the state of Ohio, with the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, so that they have sisterly relationship, you see. There's something very innovative which we did, and I think it still continues, you see, as far as we are concerned with similar things. So where are we now? I think we have 50 dialogue structures, so many things are happening. Obama was the chief guest and things like that, you see. Okay, now coming, finally, I would like to say a few words. How India-US relations are shaping at level states, since this is the thing. At the question, I think the former ambassador Richard Verma expressed a wish to see more interaction between American governors and Indian chief minister. I'm not saying much happening on that. For example, I think our chief minister Haryana, he visited I think in 2015 the states. I think also see that Secretary of State John Kerry came to Gujarat, vibrant Gujarat. But I think we are not seeing. But something happening at the level of these cities. The US Trade and Development Agency has signed some agreements with the states to see how they could improve or help us in setting up smart cities. The biggest challenge, I would say now, to India and USA is how to keep up the momentum in our bilateral relationship and find innovative ways to take it forward. Our primary focus would be to ensure that we do not revert back to transactional nature in our bilateral relationship. I think we said that we have reached a stage, you see, from transactionalism to transformation. So there's again a chance, if you talk in terms of the small thing we do, we have to affirm our commitment to larger goals and not to see relationship in terms of deals. Foreign relations cannot be depend on deals alone and have to be guided by larger interests. We would also have to see how we can find innovative ways to integrate made in India with made in America, to which our leaders stand committed. Yes. We have to find a way to avoid mismatch between flow of services and service providers. While addressing intellectual property rights, we will have to strike a balance between the interests of entrepreneurs and humanity at large. We will have to ensure that we succeed. Finally, the word of the states. I think in India, we are laying a great stress now these days. I think I would like to inform you that in the Ministry of External Affairs, we have created a separate division, states division, so which is involved, and I think Singapore is taking good advantage of that. And I myself personally see, from my experience, to see that visit of the chief ministers in Malaysia was very useful, and in particular, the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh was able to replicate what are things to be done in Malaysia as cyber city. And I hope that this is an area which we need to study, and the cuts could probably look at it, how India and USA are getting involved in the states, which could be helpful for the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sahai. It is important for us to revisit history. We have to look at future. And just to, one of the commitments that we made, each of us, US and India, is to raise our trade from $115 billion to $500 billion in the near future. So that's a big challenge which I thought I just wanted to share. Sebastian, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm from Chile, so I tend to speak a lot. But the good thing is that my English is very limited, my vocabulary is very small. So let me first thank Scott for inviting me to join this meeting, and I wish you all the best for this today's meeting. I would like also to congratulate the North States of India for their significant efforts to improve their doing business environment, and they have shown a lot of progress in the last few years since the World Bank has been working together with the government of India and the states in order to improve the business. The long-term determinants of competitiveness is productivity. Productivity means basically that resource needs to be allocated in an efficient way. There are a lot of determinants which are very important in order to increase productivity, and this goes well beyond the business reforms of the business indicator, as was mentioned by Mr. Mitchell earlier. Things that I think needs to be emphasized in the future, moving forward in the northern states and also in other states in India. We need to start focusing on quality of the regulations. So far we have been very much focusing to providing transparency and making regulations available to the enterprises and firms, but the quality of the regulations is something that needs to be thinking very carefully. Together with this is basically that putting information available in online is not enough. It's also important to think about the engineering process to simplify and to make things more rational, and I think that is a second step that we need to look forward in order to improve our business environment. Finally, on this topic as well, I think that it is important to have more efficient mechanism to get feedback from the private sector, from the users, and to what extent they are feeling and benefiting from the reform. This is something that we have been working with the government of India as well as the state level in order to improve the feedback that we receive from the private sector in terms of the reform. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of other factors that are very important for determining the competitiveness of the states, and I won't go into all of them, but I would like to mention one which is increasingly being focused on our work, which is firms' capabilities, and particularly medium, micro, and small and middle-sized enterprises. Firms' capabilities are determinant in order to see how we are going to be able to compete in the world economy. And in this regard, there are three main topics that we are focusing on. First, skills. Skills availability is one of the factors that are usually mentioned by the private sector as one of the main constraints in order to be competitive. Second, innovation. The capacity of innovate is very significant, and it has been also something where we see that there is a lot of improvement to do in the future. And finally, in terms of capabilities, also it is very important to improve and invest on managerial skills. And we have seen in our research that firms, especially small and medium-sized enterprises that invest in their management skills, perform much better than those firms that are not investing in their managerial skills. Of course, there are a lot of other things, as I mentioned before, where we think it is important to focus, in particular connectivity and connectivity within the state, within the country, but at the same time to facilitate the connectivity of the states to the world economy. There are three levels of policies which I think are important that need to be integrated when we think about competitiveness at the state level. The first, of course, is that there are a lot of policies that depend on factors that are administered at the government level, at the government of India level, at the union level, such as GST, for instance, or trade facilitation measures that needs to be implemented across all the states. So that's a first level. The second level, of course, is what can be done at the state level. And here there are a lot of policies that the states can focus on, and I think that many of them are mentioned in your draft report that I was looking at the beginning. And again, I think that's something that we have learned from this experience of supporting the government of India in improving the business environment, especially at our work at the state level, is the learning and the exchange of experience across the states. And here, northern states, and for instance, Rajasthan and Punjab, can teach and exchange many of their successful experiences in reforms that are undertaken, and this would benefit all the states. And I think that has been one of the most important outcomes of this competitive federalism. And with that, I would like to stop and thank you again for the invitation to join you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In terms of capability, another very important dimension is the ability to compete. And that also is extremely important when you say ability to innovate. You innovate only when you're faced with competition, and people normally would not appreciate the fact is that why competition reforms is so important. At this particular project, we had another expert on Albert Ford. He reminded us that every province or every state in the United States has their own competition laws as well. And that is something which he recommended as something which we should also look at. So I thought that's another important learning from the US as well as our own learning. Let me now request Governor, Your Excellency, to please deliver the inaugural address.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Sebastian says, the lead economist of the World Bank. Mr. Paramjit Singh Sahai, IFS retired. Mr. Pradeep Singh Mehta, Secretary General, Kutch International. Madam Ariel Pollock, Director North India, US Embassy. Mr. Daniel Mitchell, Chairman Center for Freedom and Prosperity. All the delegates, captains from the corporate world and organizations, ladies and gentlemen. The advantage one has when one is speaking at the end is to pick up something from each one of them and you make your speech. I don't want to be very long, but let me first and foremost say that you are in Chandigarh, and let me start with Daniel because he comes from New York, if I'm right? Originally. So I don't know if you have read the New York Times last week, which said that 52 cities which you must visit in the world, and one of them is Chandigarh, and the only city mentioned in India. So that's the city that you are in, and we don't call it a beautiful city, we call it City Beautiful, and for very many reasons. When you go around and see Chandigarh, it's the cleanest city, it is the greenest city. It was the dream of Pandit Nehru in those days to have a modern city, and he thought, let me get somebody from outside to design it. And he got the French Swiss architect Le Corbusier to design it, architect, and that is what you are. But I must say that today it wasn't one of those most beautiful days that you could see Chandigarh. But that reminds me of another story, and it is again of America and India friendship. That in 1963, when President Radhakrishnan went to US and at the National Airport, when he was welcomed by President Kennedy, and it was as bad a day as today, and when he was welcoming him, he said, "I'm sorry for the foul weather." And on that, President Radhakrishnan said, "You cannot change the weather, President, but you can always change your attitude towards it. And that is where the friendship is. That is where all this is all about. It is the attitude, and the attitude is so important for everything. It may be ease of doing business, it may be doing business in India, and all those things. Let me also say that Chandigarh has been recognized by the UNESCO World Site, as a world site, and the Capital Complex is an heritage world site. But you will be surprised, and this is the interesting part of it, and this is where competitiveness is, that we have such heritage sites in India, would be Jaipur, Banaras, you name it, and they are there. This, and Chandigarh would never have been nominated from India. It was nominated by the French, and that is how it became a heritage site. So this is what competitiveness is all about. Somebody else thinks of another city, not of their own country, and that's where the nomination was made. May I also say that, Daniel, you mentioned about the Indians doing so well in US, and it is a fact. And one of the things that I must mention here, there is a reason for it. There are lots of families from Chandigarh and Punjab, and I think every couple of families here has somebody working there. And when we went there, the competition was fierce. And they realized that the only way to do well in an alien country, if I can say so, was to have the best education. And what these Indians did was, they gave their children the best education at the cost of not buying a new car, at the cost of not going for a bigger house. They compromised on all that and gave the best education. And I think that was very, very important. And that is how Indians got the best education to compete and did so well. Punjab, and I must say that I have visited Punjab and I have been here for about 1 year now. And I have been to Ludhiana, which is a big market. And when I was talking to the Ludhiana industrialists there, and they all came out with that the hosiery and the other things that they were in competition with, at one time they used to export, and even if what the goods they sent across were not the best, they would think that they made a big kill. But then they realized that in this competitive world, the repeat orders are more important. And they started giving best quality, and that's why they are doing so well. But there's something that I think in the 2 days that you are here, and you must talk about, is this disruptive innovation. Now, I don't know where it would figure in your competitiveness and where, because disruptive innovations is the new buzzword. You have the Oyo, which doesn't have any single hotel of its own, but sells maximum hotel rooms in the world. There's the competition. The people have put in so much money. Here's somebody who has done nothing and is selling maximum hotel rooms. You have the Amazon and the Flipkart and all that. People going to the malls, they've invested in such big numbers and such big money and millions and billions. People go there, do window shopping, come home and order. What are those people going to do? Is that competitiveness? How is this going to happen? You have the Jio, the new telephony company, which came late. They had to come ahead, and they came up with such innovative ideas and such innovations that the two biggest rivals who used to be competing with each other, they said, let's get together to stop him, otherwise we'll be out of business. These are also issues that I think you need to discuss how to overcome them. Is that competitiveness or not? I really don't know. But I must say that in the end, or not in the end, but I'm very happy that the US Department would not have found a partner better than Cuts to implement this collaboration. Over the last several years, I have closely followed initiatives pioneered by Cuts, led by my friend Pradeep. And Cuts has consistently advocated for inclusive growth through empowerment and has backed its advocacy through evidence. Let me also mention that a new innovation in Punjab, which is also people are talking about, and the president of Israel, who was in Punjab last year, was talking about it also, and he got to know that this innovation is at the levels of the rural India, is the jugaad. Now this jugaad in Punjab, it is a name never heard of, but that is the innovation. And that is the new innovations that is required. But along with that, I think we must have an environment. We must do away with what Narendra Modi ji was talking about, that the redundant laws, and he said nearly 1,400 of them have been removed so that better ease of business can be done. And these are the issues that one must talk about. But I was in US, and I don't know about the GST in US, but when I was in US, people said that, when are you going to have the GST in India? We have it here. I remember when I was in Australia about 10-12 years ago, and they said, we are not coming into India for the simple reason that you do not have GST. You have GST and we will come to you. So these are the big things that are happening here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and that was very short but very interesting, innovative disruption. I think disruption is certainly of what is happening. Not only the oil example you gave, but Uber, is the biggest transport company in the world without a taxi in its name. So a lot of things are happening, and I'm sure these things will be discussed in one manner or the other. Let me thank once again the distinguished audience who are here, who have listened very patiently. And unless somebody is dying to raise a question, it's time for dinner. Are you dying? You will not get dinner then. Yeah. Is there a mic?
I was so much impressed with the Honorable Nasa. So my question is from Ms. Erin. Actually, I run a very innovative startup from here. I'll say very stupid startup from Chandigarh. And so, as you said that India will be the third economy by 2030. You rightly said. And my question is, the sector which will be growing in the country is technology sector. So 2 years back, I got a chance to speak in Harvard.
What is your question?
I'm in the question. So I got a chance to speak in Harvard, and there we discussed that the India is growing very fast in the startup. Only the North Indian states will not be growing as fast because there's no ecosystem here, and what has to be done in there. So
Quite right.
okay, and my question is with you: what your country is playing a role there to create an ecosystem in the North Indian states?
We have to do it ourselves. You can't expect a foreign country to do it for us.
This is what being discussed when I came to his back.
Yeah, well, we can't do as much as I think as you all can do in your own country, but we do a number of things. I'll mention we have actually an incubator that has just come up at the American Center in New Delhi called Nexus, which is about creating a nexus between all of the various elements of an entrepreneurial ecosystem that you need to be successful. Now, we bring entrepreneurs from around the country to Nexus, but I'm actually in talks with my good friend and Cultural Affairs Officer, Craig Dicker, about taking Nexus on the road and doing some of those programs across North India. And Punjab is one of the first places, as well as Chandigarh, are two of the first places that we'd like to start that. So that's just one example of some of the many programs that we're doing and ways that we're trying to bring various groups together to strengthen and build an entrepreneurial ecosystem in North India.
So actually, a lot of questions.
Thank you. No supplementaries. Punjab is one of the most innovative states. If you go back, I remember working here or teaching here for the last 30 years. Most innovative. And the governor also pointed out to stop it. Yeah. Short question, please.
Good evening to everybody and Our Highness Governor Sir. My issue is especially in concern of SMEs, small and micro enterprises. Basically, the world is of change. If at all we don't change as per the world, we leave behind the competitiveness. And that's what is happening over there in India and especially in SMEs. Because the machinery required to make the competitiveness is quite costly. And sooner it changes, that's why we are unable to compete with our near neighbor, that is China. So sir, can a government or some innovative system can be adopted to get this issue overcome? Then our SMEs will definitely convert to MSMEs or rather large industries. That's the issue, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to answer this question? I think you only re-emphasize what I have said and what.
I think what you are saying is that the SMEs is the way to go forward, and if that is, we learned from the days of after the Second World War. That was the time that Japan was, because of the war and also the atomic bombs, it was totally ruined. And they didn't really have money also. US was helping them out. But it was the SMEs that brought them back. And they started these business in small godowns, garages, and all that, and how they came about. So that is the way forward. And look at where Japan is today. How they have been able to, from little small industries, they have jumped to being one of the best, and such good cars are being built and whatnot, and ships, everything. So I think that's the way forward. I will just say one thing, that one of the biggest issues, and everybody has been talking about, and I think you will be discussing this, is single window clearance. Now that is a big issue. Now how we can do it, and I was discussing with the government, and I think they are coming out with a policy where it would be, because everybody talks about single window of clearance, but nothing has really happened that way. But the best way of a single clearance window is that all the NOCs that you are required, it should be all time bound, and they should all get together, discuss it and clear it, and it should be done in the least time, that is 1 week or 1 month and all that, and it should be all online. And that, I think, is being worked out.
Something which is a matter of pride for Punjab is that you don't have a single window service. You have a single roof service. Everything is under the same roof in West Punjab. None of the other states have this kind of thing. They still have to go from pillar to post to pillar to post. There are 15 agencies all working under the executive director in West Punjab. Now, politically, there were problems in the past. This is what we gathered, and we captured that in our findings, in our study as well. And in spite of having an excellent model, which even the other state, I was talking to the Rajasthan Industries Secretary, and they found it not very useful because ultimate blockades come at the political level. Political economy of every state, every country, every city, has its own sort of nuances or one can't answer. But in West Punjab is an excellent thing. As I said, it's single roof. Under that same roof, you will find all the agencies. I'll take a last question.
Yes, A.L. Agarwal, Vice President of Haryana Chamber of Commerce and Industry. First of all, I congratulate the organizers that the subject matter has been very intelligently chosen. Actually, this is the need of the day, competitiveness of North Indian states for inclusive growth. What precisely is happening at Mr. Mehta, you have rightly pointed out that the SMEs are employing more, exporting more, but there are impediments in their export, in their growth. Regarding iron and steel raw materials, there is monopoly of these steel companies, JSW, JSPL, and RIN and others. They give the raw material to the biggest traders, and there is no decentralization for supply of raw materials to MSM. Those who can purchase 1,000 tons or 2,000 tons, they are taking the raw material. These coils, wire rods, all iron and steel material is not decentralized. Supposing MSME needs 50 tons, 100 tons, he will not get. He will have to go to the traders only. That is the main, because North Indian states are far away from the raw material main producers. That is the biggest disadvantage. So until unless decentralization of iron and steel supply raw material is here to MSME, the competitiveness of North Indian states is special.
I'm sure you'll discuss it tomorrow. This is a very granular problem, and at policy level you can't really sort it out.
Because of so many impediments in marketing, production and finance, the new entrepreneurs are feeling shy of coming to
I feel there are some geographical advantages that some states have always enjoyed. And like even if it is power, and if you have power which used to be the conventional power that I'm talking about, there used to be the coal in one sector. Now you don't have the coal, coal here. So they used to have coal only in Bihar and Odisha and all that, and the electricity was cheaper. Now we are overcoming that with renewable energy. But all that advantages somewhere is there, because if you do not have a port, you have a disadvantage. So all these must be subsidized, not subsidized, but they have to give some sort of an assistance. I'm not for subsidies, but some sort of to offset these disadvantages. And I don't know, this will be a subject of discussion.
I'll give you an example which was a cause of concern for states like West Bengal and Bihar. There was a freight equalization policy.
Yes.
Yeah. So what you do is you disadvantage the producing states. Why should they be disadvantaged? Why should they pay the same price as you are paying? When things are being produced, we have a colleague here from the West Bengal industrial advisor who I'm sure is going to talk about it tomorrow. So we will have to look at this large country. Of course, there are various factors. This is is not the only factor.
You see, with the onset of GST.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
The other part is the.
Sir, one minute. There are some granular issues which you raised which should be discussed tomorrow at this particular session, and we are only looking at some larger issues. And I'm glad the Governor Sahib has responded to them with his own understanding of the political economy of the country, having been an MLA 4 times in Rajasthan and 3 times MP.
Don't forget, I am from the corporate world. I started my career in the corporate world, and I used to be with a firm called Escorts Limited, which used to be a Punjab firm. In those days, it was a very, very large industrial house.
Thank you. And I have 15 years I have run 2 small-scale units, so I can understand your pain, and steel particularly. With that, thank you very much. And now, thank all the honored guests on the dais as well, and particularly Governor Sahib, who is also the administrator of Chandigarh. Just not forget the important role and responsibility and the hat that he wears. Can I invite all of you for dinner? Thank you very much.